All right, GM, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Pinto Town Hall. It is a rainy day on the farm today, but it's a good day. We have a new contributor here, which is quite exciting. Axie Pen, welcome to the crew. Welcome to the party. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks, Ben, and happy to being part of this team. And what about you guys? Okay.
It's good to hear from you, sir. Welcome. Things are good on this end. It's an exciting time. So the way these town halls typically go is we go around hearing from each contributor that's able to attend, what they're working on, if anything's on their mind that they want to talk about, et cetera, et cetera. Then we, after hearing from contributors, we typically open up the floor to see if there's anything worth talking about, that people in the community have questions, comments, FUD, etc. And then if there's time remaining at the end, I typically share some thoughts on my end about what I'm observing on the farm and how things are going. So, all right. What's up, Ford Pinto? Welcome, sir.
GM.
All right, gang. Let's kick it off as we always like to with Frijo. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Yeah, this week we shifted our attention to two projects, the pod referral system and the Steve migration. So I believe yesterday I sent the protocol PR for the rest of the contributors to see, and so that they can work on what they need to do to support this on launch. So that's been completed. Now my attention is being shifted to the with Steve migration. That's about halfway done. I still need to add a couple more things there, but things are looking good. Other things on my plate, we have another person who's very interested in contributing on the farm as well. So we've been giving him a task and see how he's doing. Uh, and that's has to do with the pod marketplace. I think we mentioned in the past that one of the things we want to do is to perform a major UI redesign or rewrite. And one of his tasks is to upgrade the marketplace forms to make it much more usable and have a much better user experience when creating new listings and buying pods. So very exciting times. But that's it on my end.
Great stuff. Thank you, as always, for your hard work, Frio. It's amazing the amount of output you're contributing these days. All right. Why don't we kick it over to Pinto Pirate? How are you, sir?
Hello. I am doing well. I'm busy on the farm as usual. I'm just finishing up some of those changes to how the inflow tracking is happening. And beyond that, there was another issue that we found that it was affecting some of the events like a long time ago, like when Pinto was first deployed. Basically just like the number of in the event was like slightly wrong. And so I'm making some changes to make sure that that's getting properly tracked in the inflows as well. And I'll have like a little subgraph upgrade to correct for that also. But yeah, that I finished yesterday on the inflow side at least. So I think that's just about ready to be deployed. So hopefully we'll be seeing some updated info there soon. Yeah, and other than that, I'm working with Xtypen a little bit on some of getting him up to speed on working on the subgraphs. So been reviewing some of his work. It's looking very good so far.
Wonderful. Exciting times. Wow, interesting. You've got some time to fix some day zero accounting issues. Good to hear. All right. Why don't we kick it over to Burr. Pinto Burr. Oh, that's an upgrade. We got Burr has evolved into Pinto Burr.
I don't see that.
I see Pinto Burr.
Oh, like with the Pinto icon.
No, I see the username says Pinto Burr. For me, at least. Burr, can you set the record straight? Can you set the record straight for us, Burr? Oh, I guess he was having a microphone issue. All right. Burr, you back? Still no. Oops, someone just withdrew 1,340 Pinto. I guess they don't. Oh, they sold 1,340 Pinto. What a head fake. I thought they were unhappy with the town hall, but turns out they're lending to the system. Fun stuff. All right. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Burr to fix his microphone, why don't we kick it over to Axie Pen? Tell us, sir, how are you? How are you enjoying work on the farm? What are you working on? How are things going so far?
Doing good, and there is a protocol upgrade for supporting multi-field, and I think it's for Honor Beanstalk depth for the field, and I am contributing for subgraphs to support this new protocol upgrades and support new events types, and for me that's my first task, and that's all for me.
Wonderful. And how's it going so far?
Actually, it's not. I can say it's easy, but Frijo and Pinto Pirate was very helpful, and they are helping me, and I am getting more adapted so far, and I think I can handling with their help.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Welcome to the farm, sir. Anything you need, you've got a good crew here that is happy to help.
Yeah.
All right, Burr, is your microphone working?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, sir. So first, before you get started, can you set the record straight? Are you Pinto Burr now, or are you just Burr?
I think I chose Pinto Burr because the username Burr was unavailable, but if it was up to me, it would just be Burr.
Someone hijacked your username, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
What?
I don't know how that could have happened.
It's all good though. It's all good. I'm happy to be Pinto Burr. So
I thought maybe it was like a play on words on October. It's Pinto Burr.
yeah, well, it's supposed to be Pinto Burrito, but I guess it doesn't really make that much sense.
Tell us, sir, how are you doing? What are you working on?
Doing good. I have been working very closely with Frijo. We've been planning out a lot of the front end tasks and things that need to happen up until Q1. And so we have like a general idea now of like what tasks will be done and also like how long each of those, I guess coming up with an estimation there. And then also as well as making a couple small UI updates, such as like adding charts and also making updates to some charts and et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I've been up to this last week.
Nice. I want to congratulate you once again on this convert order book front end. I think it's going quite well. Even though, as I'm sure Ford Pinto will highlight, people aren't placing orders yet. I think it's quite a nice interface. So looking forward to seeing people use it more. Although I do see an order there resting in the order book. All right, Pintacito, what's up?
What's up, fellas? Doing good over here. Pretty simple update for me. just been continuing to do regular media content, keeping everybody up to date with what's going on the farm. Been doing a couple admin stuff in the background, and generally am laser focused on helping to build out a new project, which is going to hopefully complement Pinto. I know we've spoken briefly about it, but deferring to Ben there on appropriate time, manner, place to share relevant content there. But very excited about that, and hope we have big things, a lot of energy coming to the farm very soon. So that's mainly my focus these days.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Pintocito. All right. On my end, has been a bit of a quiet week this week. Over the weekend, we had, I can't say it was quiet for me, but it was quiet on the Pinto front at least. As Gabe mentioned, a lot of our focus is now on bringing Nebula to market, which is a very exciting time, as Nebula is directly inspired by all the work we've done on Beanstalk and now Pinto, and I think ultimately will serve as a great complement to our efforts here. But on the Pinto front, we did, Frijo, Gabe, Brendan, and myself had an interview for base batches, which is quite exciting. We don't know yet if we've been accepted, but obviously it would be quite a big deal if we were accepted. And I think that would give us an opportunity to speak and present in Argentina at DevConnect, which would be really cool. And yeah, I'm holding out hope there. Separately, I think there's still a couple more articles in the kiln, which we've already posted as part of the new docs. But I expect to continue to post once a week or so on X, just to continue to get more distribution on what we're doing. Not too much else to report. Have been monitoring the convert order book situation. Generally, not a ton of activity, as I spoke about earlier this week with Ford Pinto. But it's unclear if this is a marketing thing, like we need to spread the word more that this is around or available, whether it's that people aren't really necessarily interested in converting, or as Ford has pointed out in previous meetings, it may be that people just aren't so actively using the protocol at the moment. So I think it might be too early to tell, but definitely something I've been watching. All right, I think that covers the contributors that are here. Before I get on a soapbox and talk about some stuff I've been paying attention to, going to open up the floor to see if there's any questions, thoughts, ideas, anything people want to talk about. So the floor is open.
Has there been any further discussion on the idea of allowing people to mint Pinto against other assets, such as like wrapped Bitcoin, kind of like CDP style? I know not fully CDP style we talked about, but there was this idea floating around that was kind of similar to it.
What do you mean not fully CDP style? If you could refresh my recollection, that would be helpful.
Like CDPs always have, I mean, I guess in this case, we will always require collateral as well. But it's just a little bit different because the way that we could potentially mint Pinto is different than the traditional CDP, because you can use potentially zero interest on the Pinto when it's minted. But anyway, just curious, like, is that idea, like, is it still on the table, or what's the status of that one?
I mean, to be frank, in my mind, that was never on the table. To me, if we go back to the lessons from Terra Luna, I think the appeal to collateralization was one of the fatal flaws in the execution of that team, where ultimately their model wasn't right, and that was something that the market eventually sniffed out and attacked and destroyed the system. But from my perspective, the collapse was exacerbated. Maybe exacerbated is the wrong word. It was like made inevitable by the fact that as the system grew, there was a change in the nature of the model, where instead of just relying on the endogenous value of Luna, Terra started to be collateralized by Bitcoin. And the issue here is if you're going to maintain fungibility across the credit-based Pinto and let's call it the collateral-based Pinto, what happens is now all of Pinto is partially collateralized. And when it comes to the psychology, like ultimately money is a social phenomenon. It's a behavioral based system. If psychologically people are now holding Pinto under the premise that it's actually collateralized in some capacity, even if it's not totally collateralized, just partially collateralized, I think that there's a tremendous risk in the instance where that collateral dries up, which in some sense would be inevitable. I think that the most likely situation is that the protocol would likely lose in the grand scheme of things because people will lose faith in the system. Like the people that came and bought in under the premise that there's collateral, when the collateral dries up, are going to freak out, right? Whereas if people have always participated and bought into the system under the premise that the system is exclusively based in credit, I do think that from a behavioral perspective, the outcomes you can expect are quite different. So I've never been a fan of the partial collateralization model.
Got it. Okay, I thought that there were ideas getting thrown around that was like, we have this incredible system where you can mint a stable coin that's worth pretty close to $1, potentially without charging any interest on it. Like, what other utility can we come up with so that this system will be, more useful outside of just holding it? And so that seemed pretty intriguing to me.
Well, so maybe I had misunderstood your question, which I apologize for. But this is a slightly different question, which is, can people borrow Pinto from the system, right? So there's a difference between people minting Pinto from collateral and people borrowing Pinto from the protocol. Like mechanically, those are quite different.
Can you elaborate on the differences a little bit further? Because to me, it seems like they're almost the same thing.
They are almost the same thing, but they're not the same thing. So in the instance where what I was just talking about before, right? Collateralized Pinto via like a DAI style CDP. And I don't even think it's probably more confusing to use the phrase CDP here, because in both cases it's a collateralized debt position, right? So let's stay away from the phrase CDP. For me, the way I think about it is, where is the value of the Pinto coming from? So in the collateralized instance where you're taking some collateral and you're actually minting the Pinto against the collateral, in that instance, the source of value of the Pinto actually comes from the collateral itself. Whereas in the instance that I think you were actually asking about, you can basically put up collateral and borrow Pinto from the protocol, if you will. But you're not minting the Pinto, you're borrowing the Pinto. And
So, but when you borrow that, where does it come from exactly? Is it like a special stash of borrowable Pinto sitting around somewhere that you borrow from?
well, there's two things here. One, the answer I give you isn't going to be like an answer you can hold me to, because we still haven't come to a point where we've sufficiently resolved, although Mod had suggested some ideas in the most recent town hall when we talked about this idea, we still haven't resolved the issue where if I can borrow at some, close to zero interest rate, and then it's totally fungible, so I can then just deposit my value back in the silo and earn the silo yield. That basically just creates a vector for arbitrage, right? So there is still some issue that we haven't resolved. That so take my answer with a grain of salt, if you will. But in the current workings or design of how we would do it, basically you have all of this Pinto that is currently in the silo sitting there, right? And whether it's sitting there as deposited Pinto or as deposited LP, all of that value, all of that Pinto is currently effectively serving no purpose.
That's right. That's right. Sorry. I think the key thing I was missing was I forgot that the borrowing would be against the silo Pinto, not minting new Pinto. So yeah, that's an excellent distinction. Thanks.
Of course. And so maybe just to complete the answer for those that are listening that maybe are less experienced with this stuff than you are, Ford. So the distinction is that there is all this value already in the system. And what would basically happen under this model is that the protocol would lend out the Pinto that already exists, in some sense with a reasonable expectation that people would sell that value, right? They're going to borrow it and they're going to do something with it, but they're going to accrue interest. There will be some interest, even zero interest doesn't really make sense for the protocol to do. But let's say it's a very competitive rate of interest, such that the protocol is effectively trading short-term sell pressure for longer-term increase in demand. Because if you borrow at some interest rate, at some point in the future, you're going to have to pay off the debt. And so that's the difference. In the original model, which I misunderstood the question, the idea is that you're taking collateral and you're minting new Pinto, whereas in this model, the idea is that you're taking collateral and you're borrowing Pinto that has already been minted and is currently in the system.
So in this case, I assume the interest rate on the borrowed Pinto would be dependent on like the percentage of Pinto that are in the silo that have been loaned out.
Can you repeat that? I missed that.
So how would the interest rate be calculated? Like, let's say I deposit Bitcoin. I want to borrow Pinto against my Bitcoin. So I pull from the silo, this deposited Pinto. I assume that the interest rate would be kind of like a typical curve where the more people are borrowing, the higher the interest rate, or would it also be more price dependent? And perhaps to step back a little bit, like, is this idea still on the table? Like, is this still, something that could really bring more utility to the Pinto system? Or are there other thoughts that you think might bring more utility to the system? Or is there already enough utility that a stable coin like this, or like a low volatility money, is already useful enough? That's kind of like we can maybe start at the high level and then get into the weeds if you want to.
Yeah, and I appreciate your questions here, Ford. So in my mind, it's totally on the table. We do, as I've mentioned, we need a great answer to this arbitrage issue, which I don't exactly know how we can do it. just yet. I think that the most likely answer is actually having some sort of CDP on top of the deposited Pinto. Like the way to do it would be to hold. I'm thinking out loud here, but like hold the value in the silo and then mint some other stablecoin against it. So in that way, like, there's no arbitrage opportunity available per se. But I have to think through, like, that's a very unfleshed out idea. The point is, if we can come up with a reasonable solution that eliminates this arbitrage vector, it's absolutely something we should consider. And in my mind, I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that now is a good time to try to figure that out. Like ultimately, with the completion of the level 4 incentives, which is sort of how I've been thinking about branding the completion of this convert bonus, dynamic convert up bonus system. And there is more we can do, but this is like a real checkpoint in the model. In my mind, now the question is to focus on utility. So as Gabe and myself alluded to, like now a big focus is on launching Nebula, which I expect to be the first project to integrate Pinto in a big way. Maybe not at the day we launch in order to not fragment liquidity, but hopefully shortly thereafter. And that's a pretty big, like, that's a big step in the grand scheme of things. And the next question is, okay, so like maybe to zoom out, when we talk about low volatility money, the main places where low volatility money has utility is as a medium of exchange and a unit of account, right? And with respect to a medium of exchange, this is really what we hope Nebula will be. Where it will be an exchange that facilitates people to buy and sell assets of various types and value with Pinto, and doing so while receiving the yield from the protocol, which is to say that everything will actually be happening in S-Pinto. But the question you're asking about is really as a unit of account, particularly for loans, right? And this is where I think in order for people to have an entire economy in a decentralized stablecoin, you really do need to figure out the lending as well. So at this point, my instinct is that now is a great time to try to have that conversation to figure out what type of structure can we create here that would facilitate people to take loans in Pinto, taking advantage of the super low interest rate of value in the system, but do so in a way that also accrues long-term value to the system. So I kind of like, and I haven't sat and thought through it yet. Honestly, it just came to me now as we're talking about it, the idea of like a CDP of value in the silo. But I guess the way that would work is like it turns into actual demand for the Pinto at the time that the loan is taken. And then there's not necessarily any like additional demand. I guess there would be slightly more demand, but you're not. I guess not, because you're not paying for the you're not paying anyone to borrow it. You already own the assets. Okay? You already own the assets. So it's a different model. It's a model where instead of, as we were talking about before, like it accrues demand over time because people are paying interest. Instead, it's one where the increase in demand is sort of realized up front.
One idea just to toss in is some of these CDPs. I particularly remember MIM, Magic Internet Money from Abracadabra. They would charge like a mint fee. So if you wanted to, open your position, you would pay, anywhere from 0.5% to maybe a couple percent just to do that initial borrow. So that might be something to consider here as well in order to reduce the potential that you can just like borrow and deposit during times of growth. Is that fee to borrow should like keep increasing depending on how much the system is minting. That might have some other effects too, but it's something to consider.
Yeah, I have my own thoughts about MIM, which this may or may not be the right forum for it. But in general, I perceive these types of fees as something to avoid unless absolutely necessary, right? So the reason to put in the fee would be for people that don't, obviously the interest rates paid to depositors are variable over time. And so people don't know what the interest rate will be. And so by introducing some fixed interest rate, some friction for taking out the loan in the first place, it has the potential to minimize this arbitrage, but I don't really think it helps, right? Because the reality is that you're still realizing the opportunity cost for not depositing. So it's just a little weird. Like I'm borrowing something, I could earn 20% interest for that thing. Somehow by adding like a 10% or a 5% fee for taking out the loan, like I think that only decreases the utility of the currency as a unit of account. I don't really think that it solves this problem, right? The problem is that, maybe what I said isn't exactly right? Because the key is you're potentially willing to use the loan for things other than just earning the interest from the protocol. So it's not necessarily an opportunity cost issue. It's more just minimizing the interest rate that people are paying while also minimizing the opportunity for people to arb and with very low capital just extract yield from the protocol. So it's a little bit more complex than what I had just stated previously. Like the fee does make it such that it's a higher cost to borrow, but I don't really think that helps the problem from the perspective of I'm realizing greater friction to borrow. My reason to borrow is that I'm okay realizing the opportunity cost. I guess there is no opportunity cost in a properly designed version of the system. But the point is, ultimately, we want to figure out a way for people to borrow capital with a very low rate of interest. And if we're going to institute a fixed fee to borrow the capital, that really does compromise the utility directly. So even if we're able to protect the system from arbitrage, even if some user, is comfortable borrowing because it's a very low interest rate and they don't have the capital necessarily to put up to realize to receive the interest from the protocol, they just want to borrow at a low rate. We can facilitate that, but then to make it such that there's a very high fee with high friction to start, I think makes Pinto's utility as a unit of account much lower. So the fee is something to stay away from if we can avoid it, and I think would really only be something for us to consider as a last resort.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to actually avoid it. Perhaps a better solution would be And I know different ideas have been thrown around about this before, but the problem is the system gets to this point where it's overheating. There's so much money coming in, like it's clear that some of this demand is inorganic because they just want to hop on a couple of days later, sell after they've made a huge profit from the flood or whatever, is increasing the, I forget what it's called exactly, but it used to be like you deposit and then like only 2 seasons later you actually get your stock. I think germinating stock, is that the correct phrase for it? So could the germination period just simply start increasing like once the size of the prints relative to the size of the, I don't know, like some measurement of like, is the system overheating or not, like L2SR, the pod rate, all those factors. You could have some kind of curve that like increases the germination period based on that, so that basically if you didn't get in before it really started printing, then you're not gonna, like, maybe you'll get some of these prints, but after like a longer waiting period, which kind of would cool things off. Has that idea been discussed? Because that could also potentially fix the borrowing against the silo and looping it idea as well.
Yeah, the short answer is no. I don't think that's been discussed. I'm always impressed by your originality of thinking with respect to a lot of this stuff. I mean, you were there in March when we were talking about a lot of the future features to add, and were an instrumental part in designing this dynamic convert up bonus and the manipulation resistance there. So I think generally you're up to speed on most of the ideas that have been floated, and the one you just presented was a new one, which is quite interesting. Where, to summarize,
I don't think it's original. I feel like someone floated this at some point. Maybe it was Frijo. I can't remember.
This was talked about during the first week. We were discussing how to minimize inorganic demand during the flood. And I think somebody said this. I think it's definitely possible. There are many ways we can minimize the inorganic demand during the flood. One thing Ben suggested is that we can increase the time between in which the system rains and in which the system floods. Right. Ben's suggestion, for example, was to cache the rain stock or the rain routes. Basically, for more context, the rain stock and rain routes is how the protocol determines who gets the flood. We can cache that value much earlier prior to the flood. Like, for example, when the pod rate's at 15% or less, we take a snapshot of the stock at that point. And that would minimize people from getting in, because now, as the system deleverages, only people at that 15% pod rate will get the stock. The germination implementation, it was implemented in a way where dynamic germination periods was not in scope. So we would have to add like a rolling germination implementation, which is why it wasn't like highly prioritized. But that's the history there.
The idea of like a convert up penalty has also been floated around too. Personally, I think it would be better to see like a longer germination period before doing a convert up penalty, but I'm sure there's pluses and minuses to both features.
You're saying the convert up penalty in regards, I feel like there are two very different problems, right? The convert up penalty is trying to slow down people exiting, or trying to slow down people, converting up, to allow people to exit, to retain more capital. Whereas the former is an attempt to minimize the capital from getting in the first place. I think both definitely will help, but I feel like they're different problems.
I see. I guess there are two different sides of kind of the same problem, which is that the system can overheat and overprint. And so one of them is like kind of attacking it from the front side, stop it from printing too much. The other one is kind of from the back side. If it did print too much, then let the people who came in just for the prints like exit at a lower price. Maybe they both have a spot in the system.
Definitely. Yeah, you make a good point. It is the same problem. It's just one is trying to be preventative, and then one's trying to I don't know the other term, sorry, but the other term is trying to minimize damage after it has happened. Like, one thing I personally saw during the first cycle, the system printed so much from my perspective. And, we've reduced supply by, I think, over 30%, 40% at this point. And that's a significant drawdown, honestly, right? There's a lot of improvements from my perspective just from seeing that perspective, how we can minimize that. We've seen so much liquidity exit, which on one hand is very bullish that the system was able to handle that and still gracefully survive today. But for me, these are two data points that I see on how big the magnitude of the problem is on both sides. So I do think solving both sides of the problem, attacking both of them, it would be very, very beneficial for the system in the next couple cycles. Or, when we have a fork system, having this cold start problem, when there's just this huge influx of demand, how do we minimize that? So, very necessary problems to solve, in my opinion.
Yeah, the only thing I would maybe add here or disagree with is I do think they're slightly different problems, right? Like, one problem is how to create a setting where the amount of inorganic demand is kept to a minimum, and to do so by basically making people realize some short-term loss in mints. And it's not really a loss, it's just they don't receive the mints. By expanding the period of time where people don't receive the mints after depositing, it increases the risk of depositing, such that at least a rational actor, and there's an open question as to how rational are people when the system is really printing, a rational actor may be less incentivized to deposit when the system is already minting, unless they intend to stay for an extended period of time. With that said, I think it's unclear. I think you'd have to be quite aggressive with respect to the germination period to make it such that it really has a significant effect. Like right now, you already have to wait one full season. There's quite a good deal of risk associated with that one season because there is no guarantee that the printing continues. You could always have down converts. And I mean, there's an argument to be made that with the current way that the convert down penalty is structured, it's slightly different. But the point I'm trying to make is that in order to change the germination period to be sufficiently strong so as to really make an additional meaningful difference on disincentivizing deposits when the system is growing, I think you'd have to make it quite aggressive. Not that that's a bad thing, but at the same time, I think particularly given where we're at now, where like the system is looking for a growth cycle, it probably doesn't really want to disincentivize people buying by adding additional friction for doing so. If anything, I think the germination period, it shouldn't just be a function of the minting, it should be a function of the health of the system, right? So how much liquidity is there? How much debt is there? And it should be set, if we were going to make a dynamic system like this, it should be a function of the overall health and position of the system, not just minting. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, and I appreciate I digress quite a bit here, but it's quite complex stuff. The convert up penalty serves quite a different role, where there's always going to be outflows, and this is why I disagree that it's sort of the same thing. Is outflows can come even if we have an extended period of time where we're stable at the value target and there's very little minting. There's nothing that can really prevent, or there shouldn't be an expectation that just because the system is hanging out around the value target, that there aren't external or internal factors that cause the price to dip significantly, that can start a bank run. And obviously, the stock system has its own bank run minimization mechanism. But the purpose of a convert up penalty is that the protocol can slow down instances where people convert up too ambitiously or too aggressively, and the trade-off space there is realizing some short-term volatility in the interest of preserving liquidity in the long term. So they are the same in the context of they're trying to create long-term low volatility, but the specific instances where they come into play are quite distinct, and I think it would be better to generally think of them as independent mechanisms that are each targeting the same problem, right? Creating low volatility, as is basically every piece of the puzzle here. But the places in which they create that low volatility and the mechanisms through which they do, as well as the trade-off spaces in which they operate in, are quite different from my perspective.
Can we talk about the price liquidity trade-off for a little bit? Like at the moment, the price has been sitting around 70, 80 cents for quite a while, or arguably at the expense of preserving liquidity. After this amount of time of being under peg, I would argue that it's more prospective for the long-term success of the system, not just to preserve that liquidity, but actually to return to the value target at the expense of a little bit more liquidity. Would you say at the current state of the system that you agree or disagree?
Agree. I think it's quite obvious. The difficulty is the difficulty comes from the programmatic nature of the system, where, and this has been a problem that the system has been oriented around from its inception, or even from when it was designed prior to inception. It's very risky at best for the protocol to, in a programmatic way, perform actions in the open market. Currently, the only time that it does that is the flood. And the reason for this is if people know that the system is about to buy, they can buy, and then the protocol will buy, and then they can sell. So I do think that there's a way that we could potentially design this such that that risk is effectively eliminated. Like, we could make it such that the protocol is gonna buy to facilitate some upward price movement in the price. But if someone else buys, then that gets canceled, for example. So in that way, you could potentially eliminate the manipulation vector. It's a little cheeky, but I think we could do something like that. Now, this conversation. Go ahead.
I don't think I'm fully following you here. Who would be buying exactly, or what would be buying?
Well, are you asking about the manipulation vector for value extraction, or what the protocol would do?
What the protocol would do.
Well, the protocol would basically convert, right? So it would forcibly take all of the LP in the system, and then it would convert some of it to deposited Pinto. So before you had LP, now you have some Pinto. And in doing so, that would effectively increase the price.
And how would that work in practice? Like, is there a way to opt out of this if I don't want to take part of this? If I do take part of this, like, would I get some kind of bonus or something? I think it's an interesting idea.
We already have a system where if you want to convert, you get a bonus, right? So that, I don't think we need to do that. I also don't, the opting out thing is quite interesting. Like, this is a philosophical question in a way. Like, and I guess it has to do with your evaluation on whether people aren't converting right now because of their preference not to convert, or is it just inactivity? I think there's a good argument to be made, and that's only somewhat related to the philosophy here, but it's like there's a good argument to be made that people should have the opportunity to opt out, because the protocol should really allow people to participate in the system however they want, and if they hold up the other tragedy of the commons there, where individuals may hold LP, but in doing so, they actually hurt the system for everyone, right? So there's an argument to be made that individual preferences in this instance matter less than the overall health of the system. And yeah, so I don't know about the specifically the opt-out question.
I mean, I think it would be super cool if there was like a, after, let's say, 6 months of not crossing peg or not hitting target, then, there would be some gradual system of converts such that another 6 months out, if no one did anything, then the system would repeg itself, if that makes sense. So like a very slow, I don't know if it's every season or every 24 seasons or something. There's like a little convert that happens for the people that didn't opt out, such that those people remaining in LP would eventually convert it back up to PEG, but that also that those people that participate in the system would get like an extra reward, stock reward for participating in this way, because they are actually the ones, that are, to me, it's like a tragedy of the commons problem. It's like, I don't want to convert because you're not converting, and like, no one's converting because no one else is converting. But like, if we all, hold hands, sing kumbaya, and we all convert together, like, then maybe we would do it, and I think the only way to facilitate this level of coordination is at a protocol level, and that it's a very interesting potential mechanism to repeg, and it's almost a lender of last resort too. It's like, all right, if no one else is going to do this, then everyone's going to do it, and everyone's going to repeg the system. And this is kind of how money works anyway. Either everyone decides we're not going to use it and it's not going to work, or we're all going to join together and we're all going to have faith in the system, and we're all going to decide together that it's going to work. So a group like Convert Up kind of is fulfilling a little bit of that idea of, we're going to decide that we want to make this work, and therefore we're all going to convert a little bit up. And after, a year of being under PEG, we should be able to get back to PEG. I think it's a cool idea.
About a year ago, there was an idea that, if some time passes, maybe forcibly convert isn't the right word, but it's more like the protocol would just remove Pinto from the wells and give that Pinto to the Pinto holders, the Pinto silo deposit holders. And, I think of it as in the context of, it seems like in this protocol, there's so much demand to hold, or there's a huge preference to hold LP over Pinto, excluding the incentives. This would be a very, very powerful incentive for you to convert. In that if you don't, the protocol is going to do it for you. I think we decided to put that on hold because, again, like Ben said, it's a question of whether or not people in this protocol who hold LP have a right to hold the value they want to hold. It's a very interesting question, very interesting design. But, from a technical perspective, it seems to be possible. There's a lot to do for that. But, all of this seems to be possible at a high level.
I think we're making a couple assumptions. Like, we're assuming, we're missing a really key data point, and that is we don't know why LP holders are not converting up. So we can either try to find these people if they're willing to share and say, hey, why are you not converting up? Or, this is the blockchain. All the data is there. Like, it would be cool if we could make a silo position viewer within the UI where we see all of the accounts and, ordered by stock, such that we can click into any account and see what their positions are. Like you can already do this through basically impersonating with a wallet like Rabby, right? Except having a way to sort that then by like LP holders and figure out, are these LP holders like, are they just going to hold forever, or are some of them like converting under certain circumstances? Like what caused them to convert? Just getting a little bit better insight to the data might make us a little bit more informed about like the causes behind these non-converters.
Total. In fact, this is something that I've talked with Pinto Pirate about, creating a system like this where essentially we have a dashboard where we can see the individual wallet activities in one place and get a sense for, are people just not using the system? Are people performing actions, but not necessarily the actions that the protocol is trying to incentivize? Like right now, we really only have a mechanism to incentivize and evaluate things at the protocol level, at least with any sort of efficiency. So yeah, this is something I'm also very interested in, to get much more granular data so we can better understand what's actually happening.
So I missed the beginning of that. Is that something that Pirate is working on?
It's in the queue. It's in the queue.
Awesome. But
All
anyway,
right, so
what do you think about that? What do you think about the that group convert up idea?
So I'm generally increasingly coming around to the idea that, one, the protocol can do so in a manipulation resistant fashion. Two, I think if we hold the perspective, which I do at this point, that it would be healthier for the protocol to sacrifice some liquidity in order to return to the value target, then the question becomes more mechanistic, like under what conditions is that true, right? Under what conditions does the protocol prefer this? And this is a related question to the convert up penalty. Like, when does the protocol want converts? When does it not want converts? And I think when we talk about like the next iteration of the model at a high level, I think this is in the running. This is definitely a candidate for the highest leverage thing to add next. I think particularly if you bifurcate like utility from just raw stability mechanism, I think this is probably the lead contender for the best change we can design moving forward. Like the germination thing to me is less, like I said, you'd have to do a real long germination period, and I question how useful that is. Obviously, like if we have a big pump, it's slightly useful, but like in its current state, the protocol is happy to have a big growth cycle. So my instinct is that this like convert up penalty and a group convert up, like a protocol level convert up, that's probably the next. There's a good argument to be made. That's the next piece of the puzzle that should be added here.
Wow, those are some pretty powerful words. I love it.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, these are evolving opinions, right? Like, as I'm sure you know, Ford, historically, I've argued quite aggressively against something like this, independent of the manipulation vector, which, again, I think is solvable at this point. My instinct has always been to see if we can get the incentives good enough to facilitate the behavior. But like in the context of this convert up bonus, this dynamic convert up bonus, one of the things that I've raised is, given the lack of like a FIFO structure in the silo the way we have it in the field, even though we have a similar mechanism, it's unclear to me how great of an incentive structure we have here. And it's pretty darn good from a like theoretical perspective. It's hard for me to imagine us doing better if you know what I'm saying. But in terms of practically, behaviorally, how much efficacy is there in this incentive? It's somewhat limited. But then when you layer in this idea of, well, if nobody converts, then you're still going to get converted, and it's going to happen at the group level. I actually think that does make the situation much stronger. It makes the incentives for individuals to convert much stronger, such that it may be less likely that the protocol ever needs to do the group convert, unless you have the instance where the people still holding LP are just not actively maintaining their positions, right? So it's an evolving game that we're designing here. It's an evolving design space. And as we get more data, I think the right thing to do is to readjust and reevaluate priorities. So, there's still quite a bit of work spec'd out over the next couple months. A lot of cleanup, a lot of front end and middleware work, these new charts, updating the front end to be more user friendly and integrate Tractor as a first class citizen in the interface, which is something we've talked about quite a lot here. But my hope is that early next year, call it around springtime, we'll be in a position to have another powwow like we did this year, and decide on what the next year or so of development looks like. So it's this is I don't necessarily think that we need to do this immediately, but I will spend some, I think it is worth considering, like, how important is it for us to be at PEG right now? Right now we're a couple 100K below the value target. Like, at some level, it's it's frustrating that with 250K we could return to the value target and we're not there. Maybe this group convert is the right way to do it, and then we should move it up in the timeline. So, yeah, just a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. Personally, I feel like we do need to integrate Tractor into the front end. Like, that needs to happen, and then thereafter we can talk about what is the next layer of the protocol to create here. And yeah, there's a very strong argument to be made that this is something that should be done next.
A lot of the things you mentioned in the roadmap coming up are more non-contract related. So I don't know how resources look like now, but I think if there's not that much left to do on the contracts, then this could be like the next in the queue after that other contract stuff is done.
Totally. Yeah, and there's not a lot of front end work that would be related here. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about slating into the queue sooner rather than later.
How often are these town halls? I would love to, hop on the next one and keep talking more details about this idea.
Every week, sir. Every week.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy. I just can't always make all of them. But if I'm here next week, I'd love to keep talking about this idea.
Yeah, the other thing is, what do we got to do to get an uncollateralized loan into this bad boy? That's a whole other topic. It's over there. All right, everyone. We've run a little over. Thank you very much, Board, for helping steer the conversation this week. And hopefully we'll see you next week.
Hopefully. Thank you. Chat soon.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.